Today on Camper's Corner, we have a good friend, Subi Ghosh. I think of Subi like I would say like one of like Neil Armstrong's teachers would think of Neil Armstrong. Like they were part of that. And so I'm super proud of her progress. I was fortunate enough to work with her in the earliest stages of her career, and she has come such a long way, baby, like the cigarette commercials. So I'm really happy to have her with me to discuss the summer camp, and really happy to have her be part of the summer camp as a camp counselor. Subi, for the two or three people who don't know who you are, tell us about yourself.
Oh, stop. I'm so thankful to be here. I am Subi Ghosh. I'm the Executive Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Marketing at Stream Companies, which is a full service, fully integrated advertising agency. I started on the retail side and was the assistant to the internet manager and then slowly became the marketing director and e-commerce director for my store and then a couple of the other stores that the owner of my location owned, and then moved to Maryland to work at a small group, a good sized group. And then somewhere along the path was asked to, I just started speaking out for my peers and colleagues who we were in the same battles and having the same experiences. So forums like Dealer Refresh and Facebook allowed us to connect with each other. So speaking up for my colleagues, started speaking at events and met you and Joe, and relied on you guys at my very last dealership to really help me navigate these kind of newer areas and data. And so from there, I went to the dark side of the agency world, where I feel like I was able to flourish and help as many people as possible instead of those individual rooftops, and found that as much as I never thought I'd leave the dealership world, I found that it gave me a place that I can really grow and help as many people as possible, because that was always my main goal. So very happy where I am, but wouldn't be here without the support of my peers and people like you.
Well, thank you. That's a very nice introduction. I gotta tell you, like, I don't know why it's always a dark side when it
I
comes to the vendor
know.
world. Everybody says like the same thing, and like it's something to apologize for. And
No, I actually don't feel that way anymore, right? Like when I first moved over, that's probably how I felt from being on the retail side. But uh, now that I've found Stream and I've been here for 6 years now, I realize how much heart and passion goes into studying the industry and being engaged in the industry and helping people solve problems, whether it has to do with advertising or not. We're solving problems well outside of our scope. And that
Mhm.
allows us to grow alongside our partners. And so I definitely don't consider it the dark side anymore. I think it's awesome.
Well, I think that we uh in the retail side of things, I think we get used to just doing everything by ourselves, and there's a certain subset of people that have to wear a bunch of hats. And I find this a lot when I work with startups and kind of entrepreneurial business outside of automotive. Is you get this sense of like I have to be the best at everything. And one of the things that they teach you right away in business school is like the very best managers learn how to delegate and pick really good people to do the best for them. You're not going to be the best at everything. There'll be always, it's like my dad said, there'll be always somebody bigger and tougher than you. When I was in my Billy Badass days as a teenager, with a big mouth, and but like in everything in this space, like I think we should really empower people to be the best at what they're good at, and I, oddly enough, like I never really wanted to be the best salesperson. It seems kind of weird to say that, but I knew there were people who were way more passionate about the sales side of things. And I did very well. I mean, I contributed a big percentage to the dealership, but like I knew there's other people that I could make better by the either getting better leads or helping craft different processes and things like that. Like I wanted to lift them up and make them better. Like I kind of had my eyes on other things. And I think when we look at the whole ecosystem of retail, the vendors are also part of that. I really feel
Sure.
that way because they have different ways to lever their resources and their personalities and their expertise, and we all get better, and
I couldn't agree more. I mean, to be fair, I when I look back on my last dealership experience, I was coming to this place, excuse me.
don't die. I'm not on this call. Keep it together.
Not until the event. Got it.
Keep going to the event.
I was coming into this place where, and this is how I see a lot of my colleagues in that similar role, there is so much that we have to take on that we're really not real experts in anything. We have to be this jack of all trades, master of none, right?
Mhm.
And so where I felt that what contributed to my success accidentally at the time, I didn't intentionally do it, but now I do because of what I learned, is this brain trust concept. I've talked to you about this before. So no matter what I'm doing, no matter what role I'm in, I always look to surround myself with my brain trust of people that I fully vet and make sure are really the best in their field, that are exposed to things I'm not exposed in, that are studying it day in and day out, that I just don't have the time for. And so I feel like that is the mentality of our best partners, of how can I have extensions of my team that really know what they're talking about. And I think that is why I'm so excited about camping, because not only is it a very different experience, which I think we've all been hungry for instead of the same old, but it's this curated group of people that are really students of their craft, that are students of the world that they live in, and they're bringing in their expertise to share it openly and in an unbiased way, which is what I've been begging for a long time. So I'm excited.
You like ripped the segue right from my brain. Clearly we talked too much.
I've been trained so well.
I was going to transition. But I think you hit the nail directly on the head. Imagine that. But it is that, right? I think there's a lot of us in this business, like we're fortunate enough to get out there and meet the right people and have an open mind and learn from other people. And we're part of that's being open to it. I think we have to be open to it. I think we all know people who are super arrogant that think they know everything and they don't need to talk to other people or even admit that they don't know it all. But I think
that's on both sides, right? Like, I think this industry sometimes has a way of making you feel like you have to have that arrogance to be able to be seen and heard, but that I think has died a little bit. And there's always going to be people. There's always going to be vendors that shove their thing down your throat, and it's not, this unbiased education
G-rated, okay,
of sharing. But it's on both sides. But I think the vast majority of people that I've come across, and especially this curated group of people that you're bringing together, are really aligned with how do we bring people up? How do we educate the masses? How do we make sure that we're all really looking for the greater goal of that really we should all have, which is, a better experience, transparency, all the things that are going to make the industry and each individual thrive and grow.
Right. I think when we think about, I think our sort of philosophy is about evolution, right? I think, we've known each other long enough to know, like, it's not about a revolution. It's not about making all these huge changes all at once, all at the same time. Like, things have got to happen like in an incremental way. But I also think we would agree that to some extent, things are being held back from the evolution. I had a really valuable conversation with one of our keynotes. I won't mentioning names here because of editing and whatnot. Like I said, but one of our keynotes that should be there. But he was, really brought up a great point of how, as a business, like, you need to think about how your business reflects your market and vice versa. Like, it should be a mirror image. And you and I have talked a lot about, persona and, just all those types of things, or long before you were in your role in marketing. But I think it's the same with automotive conferences, is that we're trying to build a better mirror, to have people, learn from each other. We want to build that peer group back to where when you kind of came in at the tail end of conferences where you could still build a peer group, like you could still meet people and they wanted to share with you. They wanted to be very generous with their time and energy. And you were fortunate enough to take advantage of that, and look where you are now, but I think a lot of people who have come up, they haven't got that. and I
Yeah.
think that the conference is better or worse. I know they all got their own agenda. I don't feel like there's that reflection, to whereas you can have a vendor partner, and I think that just came up in a post recently about how there's no such thing as a vendor partner, and I vehemently disagree with that. Like I
What?
think, yeah,
I actually have this like visceral reaction when
it's like, yeah,
people bucket
yeah,
people as vendors, because if that's what you have, then
mm,
you're definitely doing it wrong, and the people you're partnered with are wrong.
yeah,
I can only speak from my experience, and I've been at two different um, partner agencies, right? And each time, especially at Stream, we're walking in to help people hit their goals. We're
mhm,
breaking down their numbers and their preconceived notions of what their budget should be. Sometimes we're saving the money. We're not just greedily going in and saying like, how much money you got, right?
mm,
And so I think when you evaluate someone's expertise and you're looking at their pitch, everyone has wonderful things to say about themselves and their
sure,
accolades and stuff, right? Um, but talk to their other clients. Like, how are they approaching it? Are they defining mutual KPIs? Are they walking you through what it would mean to be a partner, and how they go about, what's their communication cadence like? How are they connecting with you? Because I don't feel like I would be able to stay at Stream or any other agency or company if I didn't feel like we were actively engaged
yeah,
as a partner, as someone that's, I mean, I think almost all companies now are like 30 days out. And the whole concept is we've got to earn your business every single month. So if we're
sure,
not aligned, and if you're not growing, and
mm,
if you're not seeing the value, then we're definitely not partners, because then it's
yeah,
just a contractual relationship. And I don't think anybody wants that, because it's harder too on the vendor partner side to manage a relationship that seems contractual.
yeah.
So I don't, the fact that vendor partners don't exist is a commentary. I mean, I've stayed away from a lot of that stuff for a long time, so I'm surprised that that's a concept that's out there, but someone is confused.
Well, yeah, and I think that again, I think there's that sort of, I don't know how to describe it even. Like I said, like there's that sort of element that just wants to keep things the way it is. And
Yeah. I
um
mean, fear of change. I learned a lot from Dave Renner, CEO, and
mm,
he's built an agent. Like, I say this jokingly, but it's serious. But he's built an agency that functions significantly in auto,
mm,
and that has had consecutive growth for 26 years.
yeah, it's
That is
pretty crazy.
super unheard of,
Yeah,
right? And like the Inc. fastest growing company is like 15 times. Like, that's
yeah.
not normal.
Well,
And
especially
so I
not like
always
in
pick
a,
his brain. And
yeah.
the greatest lesson that I learned from him is the art of the pivot,
Mhm,
right? So he's very quick to uncover when we need to. We can have an idea that we really love, but if
mhm,
it doesn't serve us today, we've got to move, and we got to move fast. The number of reorgs and changes in strategy that we face in a year is like nothing I've ever experienced. And I think that allows me to see things a little differently, right?
mhm,
Like, I used to have a very strong opinion of, fearing change, but I think that's the world that we lived in, especially in retail. We're so afraid of losing
mhm,
our value. But every time we function out of fear, I think that it's going to be very blockbustery of us, right?
yeah.
So I Carvanas
Blockbuster.
and Teslas have come in without that fear, and like, why can't we adopt some of that stuff to evolve, like
Yeah.
you said, instead of that revolution, that evolution, to just enhance what we already do a little bit to solve the things that consumers are complaining about
Mhm.
that are causing them to look elsewhere. I don't know, we've gone on
Yeah.
a tangent, but
No, it's valuable, and a couple things that come out. One, I was gonna say, like, you guys are not like traditionally like a big market. You know what I mean? You're a big city, but I mean, like, you're not propelled by the coasts as much as some other agencies have been. And God bless them for it. I don't think you guys are only the exclusive agency of partnerships either. There's a lot of great agencies that will tell you no when it's necessary. But three, I think one of the things that kind of jumps out is like this idea of, you said before, like, the camp is something that's almost necessary. What did you mean by that?
I personally, I find a lot of value in, the conferences that exist. I pay homage. I know that I would not be here had I not had the opportunity to go and connect with people, to find, mentors and champions and advocates in the space, but also find peers and people that I can also mentor. So I definitely see the value in those things. But at some point in my career, it felt like the same thing every single time. And
Mm-hmm.
even more so when I moved to the agency world, where it's the same group of people, sometimes saying the exact same educational messaging that's been going on for 10 to 15 years. And and as much as I find the value, what I found most impactful at those things in the later stages of my career have been the discourse, the ability to brainstorm and pick at each other, and like lunch or dinners where we would get to just to be ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
debate each other. Those were what I found the most amount of value in. And so having an environment that is away from the stuffy, suits and classes and presentations that bring absolutely no value to our lives sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
having this kind of opposite feel of discourse first, debate, and kind of this organic sharing of knowledge is something that I've been hungry for a long time, and uh, I haven't even brought my company to those events for a long time. And this is something I'm really excited to kind of re-engage with Otto in a way that seems a lot more authentic to the goal of education,
Yeah.
right? I'm going in, I'm hoping to learn a lot from peers that are coming in, sharing from their world and their expertise, especially at a time where nothing is the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we're walking in saying the same things and educating the same way that we did, 5 years ago, and not layering in all of the factors that have impacted us over the last few years, um, it's a huge mistake. So I'm really, really excited about this.
I love what you said about the discussion and the debate, and I think I'm gonna say I think 2 or 3 more times and 5 or 6 more times, but
Should I take a shot
but
at it?
I would try to formulate my thoughts. But that discussion, like healthy discussion, where we look at all the variables, and I think there's this like notion of like back to basics, and they've been saying back to basics since like the early 2000s, right? So like
Really?
I I get it, but I think when you say things that are just that simplistic, like people don't realize that there's like 87 more variables are part of those basics, and just I think a basic would be just introducing yourself on the phone. Like it's hilarious to me how in 2023, whether we're coaching a dealership or not, you'll call the dealership such and such, Dodge. This is, and like nothing, I mean, you don't even say this is like, there's just, such and such Dodge. How can I help you buy a car today or whatever? I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, like
We've gotten a little fat and
yeah.
happy from taking orders.
Hmm.
And it is hard when we've unlearned behavior to relearn structure in a
Hmm.
world where we didn't need that structure
Sure.
for a good chunk of time, even though it's a small fraction in the span of our careers. There are salespeople and e-commerce people that have never dealt with anything pre-COVID era.
Yeah.
And so it's brand new information to them to put in those basics that were not necessary basics for them when they started. So I think it's all brand new. But something that you mentioned about the keynote about,
Who's interviewing here? Who I still good.
sorry, it just, as you were talking, it like brought up this memory. But one of the things that I found really fascinating was this discussion. I have like a webinar that I do, and in interviewing people, I found this thing that I think a lot of people don't talk about. Super, super fascinating. But if you go to any marketing person or e-commerce person at a retail store and ask them who their competitors are, it's the same competitors that they've been saying for 5-10 years, because that's what's been told to them. But one thing we realized is during the COVID era, there were a good chunk of people that pulled back their marketing because they wanted to save and they didn't know what to do. And it was all scary, and no one blames them for that. But there are others that took advantage of the situation. They doubled down on process. They really exposed their culture. They engaged their community, and or they kept their marketing budget, which allowed them to have a lot more exposure during that time. And what we're finding is, as we go back and talk to our clients or prospects, is that market share has shifted significantly. So when you're looking at what your competitive market is, if you haven't gone back and done it in the last year, you'd probably be incredibly surprised if you're still functioning that your competitors are the same that they were 5 years ago. And so I'm really excited to hear from the keynote, but that's something that I think I'll definitely bring up in conversation, because I find that so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, one of our keynotes is kind of talking about like how you need to trigger people, you know what I mean, in marketing. Like, that's part of it, you know.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of different, there's a whole like array of things that just come to mind when you talk about that stuff. And I think what's going to be really interesting to me is to see how like service penetration changes, you know, because so much of the last 3 years or so was about just having the vehicle. That's all you needed, you know, to just have the vehicle. How those dealerships retain those customers, if at all. You know, I've long talked about total customer value. You know, we talked about it when you were in retail forever ago, and really understand, like, quantifying like what a customer is actually, you know, worth through a dealership revenue wise. And I'd just love to see what that impact is like. If people will defect just to buy the car, but go back to a local dealership or their preferred dealership to service the vehicle, and that dealership, if they do a good job, would recuperate that money in service and sell the next car. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years and how they deal with that negative equity that'll inevitably be there.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be curious how the people who had to buy cars over the last few years, how they're going to react to the situation that they're in inadvertently, not knowing, as we live in it every day. So we see the trends, we understand the numbers, we have a much bigger understanding. And I don't think we pass that on to our consumers enough to arm them to understand how it impacts them as individuals. And let's be fair, I think that a lot of people took advantage of the situation that we were in, a lot of dealers, and it's going to be interesting, challenging, because they were so focused on making sales. And as much as there are tools to re-engage previously sold customers and service and things, the post-sales customers often ignored. And so I think layering that on with the circumstances of, you know, pricing and what kind of value is going to be in which vehicles, we don't really know how they're going to hold up over time. I think layering that stuff on is going to be an interesting challenge. And only the people really engaged are going to really know how to navigate it.
Sure. A couple things when you mentioned pivoting, you know, that's a typical like Silicon Valley phrase, you know, like it's like a lean startup mentality. And you know, as somebody who worked in a business incubator prior to getting into consulting full time, like, you know, it's something we did all the time. You know, you had to evolve. It was like speed dating your ideas, and like, okay, this fails, boom, kill it, move on, because we have a finite amount of resources to spend and a certain amount of time to get there, you know. So and it works really well for a lot of different type of businesses. But I think, you know, as a person who talks about culture, I think, and especially as somebody who is going to help, you know, their group of campers navigate the culture, and as well as sort of, you know, encapsulate all the different training and what as well they're getting. I think that culture is part of it. We talk about the people who just kind of came and went to buy a car, I think there's a reciprocal of people at the dealership that sort of came and went too. You know what I mean? Like,
huge, yeah.
And I think one of the things that comes to mind when I think of culture is, how do we get those people to stay? You know, the people who understand how to introduce themselves. Like, why were there so many new people during COVID to take those calls or handle those customers. And I think that's a factor, I think, from culture. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Um, it's complicated. It's many layers. There were some hard decisions that dealers had to make in a time where there were tears being shed. We were walking through with our partner, talking about, you know, partners versus vendors. Like, we were right there alongside them. It was a challenging time for them to not know how to move forward, and in certain states where things are just completely shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So, difficult decisions, not knowing, made them, shut their doors. There were others that had a lot more flexibility, but they couldn't guarantee the numbers that people were used to. So they lost a lot of veterans. They lost people with skills that would be the people training the future incoming class. But then, on top of the fact that there was a lot of turnover, there was also a very different sales process taking place. The entire relationship was not looking around, it was incredibly transactional. Do you have what I want? Can you get it to me in the time that I need it? And then, like, let's just get it done, because I don't want to engage with you longer than I need to.
Mm-hmm.
I had to buy a car during that time, and it was very, very, very unique experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I'm answering exactly what you're looking for, but to me, those things were all leading to a huge culture shift that I think people were hopeful this shift was going to be a positive thing for our industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's take the opportunity and really amplify efforts to be as digital savvy as possible and make the transaction as smooth as possible. But then that's where we reverted. So there's now this need to define culture internally, because we've had a lot of turnover. We have people that have never experienced sales prior to. And so we're having to rethink what that internal culture looks like, what the experience is for them, what the why buys are that they can preach and get behind and believe in. But additionally, what the external culture looks like. Sure. Are we defining? Are we sharing? Are we celebrating those wins like we used to before to help attract more people? But really, at the core of it is just defining what it means to work with them. Are we flexible again? Are we just going back to the way things were and just bell to bells and absolutely no flexibility to attract, parents and people that have different obligations? So there's a lot of change that's required, and it starts with really taking stock of what we have at that individual location, and bringing in that evolution of, who am I trying to target with employees? What kind of skills do I need to have to do the job that I'm trying to get them to do, instead of just sticking with job descriptions and expectations because that's what we've had for decades.
Yeah, I get
super long-winded answer.
No, but I get you're passionate about it, but I get gutted when I see really good employees, and you and I have worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of people now, but you get like really good people that want to show up, they want to put in the time, they want to put in the effort, and then like their role gets eliminated. But instead of like pivoting, we just talked about, and like trying to redefine maybe some of the things that they can do, or division of labor, are there things we can break out of their responsibilities to keep them on board? We'll just kick them down the road. Sometimes go to the competitor, sometimes to go into another vertical. But I get gutted when you have good people that actually care about their job, and they care about the customer, and they want to do a good job, and yet because of other circumstances, they're allowed to leave. And I talked about this on Dealer Refresh a bit back. We were recorded talking about this, but I mentioned something about building better people. But just to expand that thought, like most businesses, when you look at a Fortune 500 company, probably a lot like your agency, where you're always training your replacement. That's normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a pathway for everyone, and sometimes people kind of find their little niche, and that's where they're happy. But there's like a way for people to progress throughout the company, because things aren't so compartmentalized. And even the most like just dour, old school, big, calcified Fortune 500 companies, like they still have that pathway in place there. And I find it a little weird when it's always, people want to buy from people. You hear that all the time. This is why digital retailing fails. It's not because what they say, in my mind, because it's, I kind of been part of this my whole career, whether inside or on the outside. But what kills me is that if it's all about the people inside the dealership, why aren't we investing in the people? Why don't we look at the total employee value like we look at the total customer value? Why are we happy to spend 10, 20, 30, $40,000 a month sometimes in hiring and firing costs and training costs? Like, recording this, I feel crazy saying this, but sometimes I feel a little bit guilty about how much money of my time and my company's effort got invested into somebody that just eventually went to a competitor. It kind of makes me want to throw up a little bit, and
no, I get it.
And so I think that's when I think about culture, it's not about, I think the stereotypical, kind of this wokeness shit that people talk about all the time. It just drives me troll wall, but it's not about being huggy, touchy feely, but it's really about creating a sustainable organization.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fantastic
I
companies.
also think it's about, I mean, I can go off, honestly, but I think it's about
there's no time limit on this.
It's about arming the people making the decisions with the right information, right? A lot of times we have sales managers that act as hiring managers that have absolutely no skills to handle writing job descriptions, understanding people's skill sets. They're not good interviewers, right? They often, in my experience, look for closers. Like that's the only skill set.
Time out though. That's not their fault.
No, it absolutely is not, because we took a closer. We took a great closer and we moved them into sales management and gave them no tools to handle the people management side of sales management. And so I don't blame them at all. But what I would encourage them to do is to start again, even if you can't hire someone to be that counterpart, then create a brain trust for yourself in the skills that you need to be able to do better, right? And part of it is, like you said, my favorite thing to do is to walk into a dealership that has, asked us to come and help, even though it has nothing to do with marketing. But the people that are handling these customers have everything to do with marketing, because you could be spending the perfect budget on with the perfect messaging, but when they come in, if they don't have the experience, you're not going to convert them. So my favorite thing is to walk into a dealership blindly, like with very little introduction, just talk to all the people that the GM has identified, uncover what their skills are, what they're actually doing from their words, all the way on up to a manager level, and then put them in the seats that I believe based on their skills and their description of what they work on, and then have that comparison note after everything's done. Because what we've often done is created brand new roles based on the things that they're already doing, with a slightly different pay plan, with a slightly different title that doesn't function in the circle of, what we've done before, but just challenging them to think a little differently. Because there can often be someone wearing multiple hats that is so much value that the dealer or the GM doesn't see the value in, because we're sticking them to this role and these KPIs that make no sense to the value they're actually bringing in to the retail location. So
it's fractional. You know what I mean? Like if they focused all their effort on certain things, then they could lift the whole company up. But instead, they're only able to like laser focus on that. So, well, we're not gonna give away all the things that you're gonna talk about. But I think, like, going back to basics, like, to me, like, that seems rather basic, but it's extremely complicated.
So important.
And it's something where, if you're thinking about the fact, like, well, she's in advertising, why is she talking culture? Well, it's very simple in my mind, because, like, if you're an advertiser, like, it's the responsibility of if you're whoever your business is, it'll be a car dealership, to actually make value of what you have. And if you're a crappy hitter, you can just throw perfect, fastball pitches down the middle of the plate, over and over and over again from the advertising side. But if whoever's swinging the bat has never
Yeah.
done it before, or it's just a terrible
Speaking,
athlete, it's
speaking
time.
of back to basics, I
Mm,
think since 2020, the number one thing that we've run into is people not understanding what their brand is
mm-hmm,
and having to evolve their brand and getting back to basics in what is our why buy, what is our unique selling proposition, how does that then weave into all of the advertising,
mm-hmm,
and that comes from your front lines. It's about having those conversations and putting those messaging together to arm your team with how to talk about the company. What is
sure,
your social media needs to have that. It's all encompassing, so it does in a way stem from culture. It's just something that I feel passionately about, but
mm-hmm,
really ties closely with advertising, right? Your brand, your message, your people, both internal culture, external culture, how we're positioning it for our team to attract and recruit and retain people and arm them with what to say, but then taking that and putting it to the outside world and in
yeah.
the right mediums.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great companies out there. And I think there's another sphere even on the things you talked about of like, does your market even find value in that? Well, who's your market? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like you can keep going.
Who is your market?
Yeah, you can keep going down the
Step
path of
one.
that. Like, and I Brent and I did a session at Digital Dealer talking about, do people find value in what your culture is? You know what I mean? It's about
Yeah.
that sort of, creating that reflexive nature of how this business should work. And the best businesses, they sometimes will cut divisions. They'll do a lot of things, but they understand like who their audience is and what they find value in. And like Nike does a great job, and I think of like Patagonia. I'm a huge, obviously, supporter of that company, but like you know Patagucci, but like I from a corporate standpoint, like I love the fact that they just made themselves a nonprofit not too long ago. I think it's hilarious. But they're they buy pieces of land to preserve, and everything they do from end to end through their vendors and everything, like that's a cultural thing that's throughout the company. Like it's a dedication, and that's just one example. There's a lot of veteran owned companies out there. It's the same thing, and I like to support those companies as well.
Yeah.
um,
Well,
so
it also breeds loyalty, and I don't feel like we've had a lot of emphasis on loyalty.
mhm,
And it all starts with these basics that we keep bringing up. Like if it's not an intentional thing, you're
mhm,
not going to get loyal customers.
sure,
It has to be intentional.
yeah, that
And I
is like
think that's what we're missing.
that's a breakup quote I need to use from that. It's the way you said it. You just like tilted your glasses down. It was so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But we have a couple great dealer principles that I think that we'll be talking culture, and just in general, we have a lot of great dealer principles there that have actually can espouse a lot of the same things. And we're just really blessed to have you on board with us to help out, to help tie things together. We're gonna eat s'mores. It's gonna be fantastic.
That'll
Any
probably be
parting
my favorite
thoughts? It's gonna be your favorite part.
part. S'mores. Love me some s'mores. Parting thoughts, I would just say to anybody considering or on the fence about it, take the risk, take the chance, and surround yourself with people that you can build your own brain trust, where you can actively problem solve right on the spot. But then this isn't just about the event, because I guarantee you, if you put yourself in an environment where I would joke about this, like when you can set your brain on fire and start thinking of things that are outside of your normal day-to-day routine, that's how you can improve and get better and faster and more efficient, and bring that revenue to your business and personally grow outside of your department or your company. So definitely take the risk. If you are on the fence and need to reach out to someone to talk about it, I am on the socials. You can reach out, and I'm happy to give you my personal recommendations
Social mediums,
in the
um,
socials.
and not to extend this any further, but that community is, we keep talking about community. We want to reestablish that community. The
Yes.
thing about this conference that I'm really excited about is a lot of the speakers have agreed to stay the entire time. So it's not just an in and out like a lot of other events. And part of our event, we want to make sure is that people have access to the experts. And so even if you're in a conversation with, me or Subi or anybody else, like there could be other SMEs around there. If you like drag them in there, like, we're going to have like bona fide actual data scientists, which never
Yes.
is available. And like, hey, I
Yeah.
want to call bullshit on this, type of thing. But like, it'll be really cool to have that availability while you're there. So that way we can actually, instead of just trying to solve that one variable, we can solve a lot of the variables. So that way we can actually
Right.
come back with a solution, come back with a plan, come back with at least some tactics, if not a strategy, to
Yeah.
grow your business. So we're
Yeah.
really excited to have you there, and we're going to see you at camp really soon. So
Great.
if you'll see Subi with the giant old school frame backpack that she got in like brownies when she was in elementary school, that'll be her.
That'll be me. That'll be me.
All right, we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.